So, welcome back, everyone. We've got some pretty major news breaking just yesterday, June 27th. It's quite something out of St. Johns County.
It really is. More than half of the St. Johns County Airport Authority Board, they're now facing criminal charges.
Exactly. And this isn't just, some minor local story. This feels like a really big deal for how government works, transparency, accountability, all those things that affect you directly.
That's right. And we're not talking small stuff here. These are allegations about violating Florida's Sunshine Law. That's the bedrock of open government, right?
Yeah.
And then for one board member, it gets even more serious. A felony charge for witness tampering.
Wow. Okay, so today we're going to really dig into this. We'll look at who's charged, what exactly the charges are, the history behind all this, because apparently this has been brewing for a while, and crucially, what this means for St. Johns County moving forward.
Yeah, it's definitely a critical moment. It touches on public trust, how local decisions get made. It's a lot to unpack.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Who exactly is facing these charges?
All right. So there are 3 board members involved. You've got Reba Ludlow. She's actually the board chair.
Okay, the chair herself.
Yep. Then Len Tucker Jr., another board member, and Dennis Michael Clarke, also a board member. So 3 out of the 5.
And what's the specific charge they all share?
All 3 are facing a charge called violation of the Sunshine Law. In Florida, that's classified as a second-degree misdemeanor.
A misdemeanor, okay. But you mentioned something more serious for one of them.
That's right. Len Tucker. He's got that misdemeanor charge, but also additional, much more serious one, tampering with a witness in a misdemeanor proceeding. And that was a third-degree felony.
A felony, okay, that definitely escalates things. So let's talk penalties. What could these charges actually mean for these individuals and, I guess, for the airport authority itself?
Well, for the Sunshine Law violation, the misdemeanor, if they're found guilty, it could mean up to 60 days in jail or a fine up to $500. Or both. But, and this is important, it goes beyond just fines or jail time. Any decisions made during meetings that are found to have violated the Sunshine Law, those decisions could potentially be nullified, voided.
Voided. So past actions could be undone?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It could create a real mess legally and operationally. And, of course, there's the possibility of them being removed from office.
Right. And for Len Tucker, with that added felony charge, the stakes must be quite a bit higher.
Oh, absolutely. Witness tampering, a third-degree felony.
Yeah.
We're talking a maximum potential penalty of up to 5 years in prison, plus a $5,000 fine. It's serious stuff.
And what's the current status? It's June 28th today, so this just broke.
Right. So we know Tucker turned himself in yesterday and was released on bond. For Ludlow and Clarke, reports say they're expected to receive court summonses soon. So the legal wheels are definitely turning now for all 3.
This whole thing really hinges on Florida's Sunshine Law, doesn't it? We hear that term, but maybe not everyone fully gets why it's so fundamental. Could you break that down? Why is this law so important for, the average person listening?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because the Sunshine Law isn't just some obscure rule. It's really like a cornerstone of how democracy is supposed to work, especially at the local level.
How so?
Its whole purpose is to make sure that government business discussions, decisions, debates happens out in the open, in public, where people can see it.
So no backroom deals.
Exactly. It's designed to prevent public decisions from being made in secret. It forces transparency and makes officials accountable. So whether it's your city council, your school board, or, like here, an airport authority, you, as a citizen, have a right to see how they're managing things, how they're spending public money, your tax money.
It really sounds like it's about building trust then. If you can't see the process, it's hard to trust the outcome, right?
Precisely. Public confidence is built on that transparency. And the law has teeth. If someone knowingly violates the Sunshine Law, it's not just a slap on the wrist. It's actually a criminal offense.
A criminal offense for not holding a meeting in public.
If it's a knowing violation, yes. Even unintentional violations can lead to fines. And, significantly, if someone successfully challenges a violation in court, the public body, the airport authority in this case, might have to pay the challenger's attorney fees. So there's a financial risk for taxpayers, too, when the law isn't followed.
Okay, so it's serious. And what's worrying here, from what I've read, is this doesn't seem like a one-off mistake. The reports suggest a pattern, right? Alleged violations and warnings going back years.
That's what the charging documents seem to indicate. It paints a picture of, well, maybe not just mistakes, but a potential disregard for the law over time.
Can you walk us through that timeline a bit? What are some of the specific incidents alleged?
Sure. It seems to go back to at least 2022. There are reports alleging Ludlow and Clarke were seen in private meetings, apparently with airport financial information up on a screen.
Okay.
And when Ludlow was reportedly confronted about it, her alleged response was, well, that they were just trading recipes.
Creating recipes with financial documents visible.
That's the allegation. If true, it suggests, well, a certain attitude towards the rules right from the start, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And did it stop there?
Apparently not. Fast forward to January 5th, 2023. Ludlow and Clarke were again allegedly caught speaking privately right before an official board meeting was supposed to start.
Oh.
And this time, the executive director at the time, Kevin Harvey, reportedly warned them about it directly.
So an internal warning was given, but the behavior allegedly continued.
It seems so. The allegations suggest more private meetings occurred throughout 2024. There's one specific instance mentioned where the interim executive director, Courtney Pittman, allegedly met privately with Ludlow and Tucker to discuss items on the agenda outside of a public meeting.
It sounds like a consistent pattern if these allegations hold up, not just accidental run-ins.
That's what the reports suggest.
Whoa.
And then things really seemed to escalate earlier this year in February 2025.
What happened then?
The airport authority's own lawyers, the Douglas Law Firm, a pretty well-respected firm, they dropped the authority as a client.
Their own lawyers quit. Why?
Their withdrawal letter was apparently very direct. They're quoted as saying something like, "Our firm has repeatedly advised of the consequences that could endanger the airport authority. Those warnings and legal advice have been ignored."
Wow. That's a massive red flag, isn't it? When your own legal counsel basically says, "We warned you, you didn't listen, we're out."
It's huge. It suggests a serious breakdown. And remember, this wasn't the first time legal counsel had raised concerns. A former general counsel, Jeremiah Blocker, had previously accused Ludlow and Tucker specifically of his words, brazenly violating the Sunshine Law and ignoring legal advice.
So multiple lawyers sounding the alarm over time.
It appears so. And while Clarke wasn't named in that earlier accusation by Blocker, he's obviously facing charges now, suggesting the alleged pattern involved him too.
This all seems to build towards a really crucial board meeting on March 10th of this year, 2025. What happened there?
That meeting was critical. A motion was actually put forward to start an internal investigation into these potential Sunshine Law violations.
An investigation. Okay, that sounds like the right move.
You'd think. But Board Chair Ludlow, who was one of the people whose conduct would be investigated, allegedly refused to recuse herself from the vote.
She voted on whether to investigate herself.
Apparently, yes. And she voted no. Dennis Clarke also voted no. Len Tucker did recuse himself. But with Ludlow and Clarke voting no, it ended in a 2-2 tie, and the motion to investigate failed.
So the investigation was blocked by the very people accused.
That's what allegedly happened. And there's another layer. There are allegations that Ludlow and Clarke met privately before that meeting, specifically to discuss taking the Douglas Law Firm's withdrawal letter off the public agenda.
It just keeps getting deeper. What does that say about the board's commitment to transparency if they're allegedly trying to avoid investigating themselves?
It raises serious questions, certainly. But perhaps even more concerning are some of the specific comments attributed to the board members in the reports.
Comments? Like what?
Well, sources allege that Clarke, at some point, remarked that the Sunshine Law was too restrictive and that the penalty was, quote, only a $500 fine or just a slap on the wrist and a fine.
Only a $500 fine. Wow, that sounds incredibly dismissive of a law meant to ensure public access.
It does, doesn't it? And Ludlow allegedly made comments, too. One report claims she suggested they needed to be careful not to be seen by a particular staff member who apparently warned them frequently about violations.
So trying to avoid the person pointing out the rules.
That's the allegation. And perhaps most strikingly, she also allegedly remarked that the sheriff's office had investigated before, but they cannot get anything out of her, and then reportedly shared a laugh about it with Clarke.
Laughing about potentially evading investigation?
Yeah.
That's really something. What does that kind of attitude signal to the public they serve?
It's deeply problematic. Ben Wilcox from Integrity Florida had a quote about this, saying something like, "Doing this willingly and almost laughing about along the way. And that just looks terrible to the public." And he's right. That kind of alleged behavior just erodes trust completely. It makes you question their respect for the whole process.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift focus slightly to that felony charge. The witness tampering allegation against Len Tucker. That takes this to a whole different level, doesn't it?
It really does. Because now we're not just talking about potentially illegal secret meetings. We're talking about an alleged attempt to actively interfere with the investigation into those meetings.
What are the specifics of that allegation?
Tucker is accused of trying to intimidate the interim executive director, Courtney Pittman. The allegation is that he pressured her to withhold information from the state attorney's office during their investigation.
Intimidating a potential witness, that's serious.
Extremely serious. If proven, it's a direct attempt to obstruct justice, to undermine the very process trying to uncover the truth about the alleged Sunshine Law violations.
And was this investigation based just on one person's account? Or was there broader evidence?
Well, the state attorney's office reportedly interviewed several people, current and former top officials at the airport. And according to the reports, all of them gave statements saying they saw board members holding private meetings that seemed to violate the state's transparency laws.
So multiple insiders telling a consistent story.
That's what it sounds like. It suggests these weren't just isolated incidents or misunderstandings. It points towards a pattern that was apparently visible to many people working closely with the board. It suggests a potential culture issue within the authority's leadership.
Okay, so putting all this together, what does this mean for St. Johns County right now, today? The immediate impact is obviously on the Airport Authority Board itself. 3 out of 5 members charged.
Yeah, it throws the board into turmoil. Operationally, it's got to be challenging. And internally, there's clearly friction. We know board member Jennifer Liotta has already publicly called for Ludlow, Tucker, and Clarke to resign.
So calls for resignation already.
Yes, the board is functioning with the remaining members for now. But you have to imagine this cloud hanging over them impacts everything. Their effectiveness, their ability to make decisions, and certainly how the public sees them.
And thinking about the public, for you, the listener, the resident, the taxpayer in St. Johns County, these charges, especially with the alleged pattern, the dismissive comments, the witness tampering, it must shake public confidence, right? Does it make people question the integrity of the whole system there?
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
When you see allegations of elected officials seemingly disregarding laws designed for transparency, maybe even laughing about it and then allegedly trying to obstruct an investigation, it inevitably erodes trust. You start to wonder if decisions are being made fairly, not just at the airport authority, but maybe elsewhere too.
Are there potential ripple effects beyond just trust, like operational or financial consequences for the county?
Definitely. We touched on this earlier, the possibility that past board decisions made during potentially illegal meetings could be challenged and maybe overturned. Think about contracts, projects, financial plans. That could create huge instability.
Leading to legal battles.
Very likely. Costly legal battles for the airport authority, which ultimately means costs for the county and its taxpayers. You've got the cost of defending the individuals, the authority itself, potential fines, and the cost of dealing with any voided decisions. It could get very expensive.
Plus, just the sheer distraction. It must be hard for the authority to focus on its actual job running an airport when its leadership is caught up in criminal proceedings.
Exactly. It creates dysfunction. And remember, these are elected officials.
Yeah.
So this whole situation casts a shadow over the electoral process, too. It raises questions about accountability, future elections, maybe even whether the governor might need to step in, given these are state law violations.
And what about the county's reputation overall? St. Johns County often prides itself on being well-run. How does something like this affect that image?
It's damaging, no doubt. A county facing high-profile criminal charges against multiple elected officials. That's not the image you want. It can affect economic development, tourism, people's willingness to move there. Public trust is valuable, and incidents like this can tarnish it significantly.
It really underscores how fragile that trust is, and how important it is for officials not just to follow the letter of the law, but the spirit of it too, right? Especially something like the Sunshine Law.
Precisely. The alleged actions here, the secrecy, the dismissal of warnings, the witness tampering accusation, they strike at the very heart of ethical governance. It shows that the law itself isn't always enough. You need officials committed to upholding its principles. When that commitment seems to be lacking, the system starts to break down.
So, just to recap for everyone listening, we've got a major situation unfolding in St. Johns County. 3 Airport Authority Board members, including the chair, are facing criminal charges for alleged Sunshine Law violations stretching back years. One also faces a felony witness tampering charge.
Right. It's a story marked by repeated warnings, allegedly ignored legal advice, dismissive attitudes towards transparency laws, and now serious legal consequences that challenge the board's integrity and function.
It really brings home that public trust relies so heavily on the conduct of elected officials. It's not just about rules on paper, it's about their commitment to openness and accountability.
Absolutely. This case in St. Johns County serves as a pretty stark reminder of that delicate balance. When alleged misconduct erodes that trust, it really shakes the foundation of local government.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. As this situation continues to develop, think about this. What role do you as a citizen play in demanding and upholding transparency in your own local government? And perhaps more pointedly, how might this whole episode redefine what accountability truly means for elected officials, not just in St. Johns County, but everywhere?